Hello and welcome to After Hours. I'm your host, Stephen Braverman. My guest today is Michael Isman, president of Royal City Jewelers and Loans in New Westminster. After starting in the family business at the age of 14, Mr. Isman bucked the trend of many family businesses by guiding Royal City Jewelers into a successful second generation. The Columbia Street storefront is now the largest single-store pawnbroker in Canada with a staff of 25 people. What's the secret to Mr. Isman's success? Let's find out. Thank you for being my guest today, Mr. Isman.
Thank you for inviting me, Stephen.
All right, now before I ask you about the secret of your success, tell me about your annual Thai fundraiser for the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. Who came up with the idea and how much has it raised?
The original idea came from Ken Basso, who was our loans manager. And the idea was to solicit autographs on some neckties and then auction them for the food bank. And we've completed 17 auctions. We're into our 18th year, and we've raised approximately $200,000 for the food bank.
Very impressive. And who are some of your well-known regular contributors to
our
the
most
Thai fundraiser?
constant donators are, you won't believe this, Jay Leno and Donald Trump contribute every time we ask them.
Oh, great. Any others you want to mention?
We got lots of Vancouver Canucks, BC Lions, Vancouver Whitecaps, local celebrities, anybody we can get a hold of who's in town doing television, movies, whatever.
Travis Lulay, the quarterback for BC Lions,
Yes,
too?
Absolutely, every year.
And now, when is it actually held every year? So
The
auction
is the last week of November every year.
Okay.
Usually ends on a Saturday.
Okay, everybody mark that on your calendar. All right. So as I mentioned, Royal City Jewelers and Loans in New Westminster has been a mainstay on Columbia Street since 1955. At one time, there were about a half a dozen pawn shops in the area, from what you tell me, but Royal City Jewelers outlasted them all. What did you do to secure the survival of Royal City Jewelers in such a competitive business?
Very simple philosophy. We treat our customers better than the competition. We have customers.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't treat them better, you have no business very quickly.
What are some of the things you do to treat your customers better than the other guy?
We lend more money on any given item than most pawnbrokers. We charge a lower rate of interest. We have a nicer place to come into. We have a better trained and larger staff to deal with the borrowers and buyers. Just general better all-around experience for the consumer.
You also promise half price on all jewelry. Could
Yes.
you tell me what that means exactly, half price on
When
all
we
jewelry?
sell previously loved jewelry, we determine the average retail price in Greater Vancouver, divide by 2, that's our price. Half price.
Okay. So I could then buy a piece of jewelry from you and go at a particular price, and then I can go to an appraiser, an independent
It will
appraiser.
be double or better.
Wow, that's fantastic.
No question.
That's terrific. That's really great to hear. So, as I mentioned, you started at Royal City Jewelers at the age of 14, working evenings and weekends. Did you reluctantly start working for the family business, or was it something you were gung-ho about?
No, I was happy to get involved. It was something I knew something about from dinner table conversations, and it was certainly easy to work for my father.
Yeah, tell me, what was your father's name?
Howard Isman.
And what was it like working with Dad?
Great. We shared an office for many, many, many years, probably 30-odd years, and it was very easy. In fact, after university, I found it easier to work for him than for a stranger, and that's how I came to be full-time at Royal City.
Here's what I was thinking after you told me that you started working for the family business at the Pawnshop at the age of 14. I thought, okay, well, what are most options for a 14-year-old as far as part-time jobs go? And I was thinking paper route.
Yes.
Maybe working in a restaurant flipping burgers.
Or a busboy.
Or a busboy. And I thought, maybe working around a lot of really cool electric guitars and stereo equipment and gold and silver. I thought, that sounds like a pretty good option. You must have really enjoyed it.
It was certainly more educational because it was different people, different products, different issues all day, every day. Yeah. It was never the same day.
So even though you could have committed yourself full-time to the family business after graduating high school, you did choose to attend the University of British Columbia, and you did earn a Bachelor of Commerce degree. Why was it important for you to get a university degree before actually committing to the family business full-time?
I wasn't committed to the family business initially. Okay. I thought I would go out into the world of business and make my mark somewhere else. But the market at the time was fairly tight in the middle 70s, and I worked elsewhere for a year and then found it much easier to work for the family business.
Mm-hmm. What do you think university education taught you and prepared you for? And I guess what I'm getting at is, what did you get out of your experience at university and getting the university degree?
The Faculty of Commerce at the time was turning out junior executives for huge corporations,
Mm-hmm.
Procter & Gamble. They weren't geared to entrepreneurial efforts in the least. Mm-hmm. And we tried to change that at the time and got nowhere. Mm-hmm. But it was all for major corporations.
Mm-hmm. If you didn't take up the family business, what type of business would you have liked to have worked in?
Probably a commodity trader for a bank
Mm-hmm.
or a finance company somewhere.
Okay. Now, obviously, the pawn business is known for being the oldest form of banking. Explain to me how the pawn business actually works.
We lend money based on the resale value of a personal item being left as collateral, be it jewelry or electronics or a musical instrument or whatever. It's a matter of what can we sell it for, and we work backwards from that value to determine what we could lend on it. Mm-hmm. We lend that amount of money. There's a contract for 3 months, although some pawn brokers deal on a 30-day basis. We deal in 3 months. And the borrower has the option to come back and pay us back at any time within the 3 months with interest and get their item back. Mm-hmm. And most do.
Mm-hmm. And you actually believe the existence of pawn shops like yours actually helps reduce crime. Could you actually explain that to me?
In simplest terms, if someone really needs $100, they've got a crisis and they've got to have $100, and there's nobody that can lend them $100, the odds are they're going to take it from somebody else. Whether it's a mugging in the street or a corner store holdup, they got to get it somewhere, they're going to get it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And another alternative, and this relates to the business that I work in, is some people might go and write a fraudulent check. And I've seen the repercussions of that too.
It's just a softer type of crime, but it's still crime.
Mm-hmm. And there are repercussions that come
absolutely.
with that, committing a crime or writing a bad check. So obviously you aren't allowed to pawn or purchase stolen merchandise. But if you do inadvertently buy a piece of stolen merchandise, you're the one who takes the loss.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. Now, I would have thought in your business the annual losses for that sort of thing would total in the thousands. But you actually say it's only about $1,500 a year, right?
It's very small.
Yeah. What are your checks and balances that are in place to make sure that you don't
We're
purchase
very careful about who we're dealing with. We want good government issue photo ID right away. That immediately scares away the criminal element. Mm-hmm. If someone brings in an expensive musical instrument or a camera and they don't know the first thing about it, we've lost interest right away. Mm-hmm. If they can demonstrate they know all about it, we'll assume it's theirs. Mm-hmm. Not a problem. Tell
me about the 3 myths of the pawn shop business.
Well, the 3 myths are who, what, and why. We'll start with who. Who is borrowing money from a pawnbroker? The public perception is it's really the down-and-out winos, alcoholics, drug addicts, and in reality, they really don't own anything of value anymore that they could borrow money on. We're really dealing with the upper lower class up through the middle class, people who have damaged credit or have reached the end of their existing credit and need something to tide them over till the next paycheck, generally speaking.
So that's the first myth, right?
Yes.
What's the second myth?
The what.
The what?
The what is public perceives us to be dealing in a lot of stolen property, and that's completely nonsense. Police departments get reports from pawn shops every day of every item that comes in. They know what to look for. If it's stolen, it's going to get picked up by the police right away. There's no two ways about it. And the odd item that we see has probably gone through 4 or 5 hands before it's reached us, and the person bringing it in has no idea it's stolen. We looked at our records and found that it's about 1 every 6,000 or 7,000 items turns out to be stolen. It's statistically 0. It's a non-starter to us. And the third is the why.
The why.
And people think people are just dumping goods, selling goods, getting rid of stuff. And that's also far from the truth. The bottom line is we're the lender of last resort. They want their goods back. They're borrowing money. We find that 94% of our loans get paid back, and the goods go back to the owner. They're not dumping anything. That, of course, that 5 or 6% that's left behind is a mountain of stuff because of the volume we do, but 94% goes back to the borrower.
Okay, so we've covered the 3 myths of the pawn business, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about what I've dubbed the 4th myth of the pawn shop business, and that's you telling me that television shows like Pawn Stars and other knockoffs are really nothing like the real pawn business, at least not in Canada. Explain to me the differences between pawn shop reality TV and reality.
I was offered a Canadian version of Pawn Stars, and the first question I asked was, will everything be a setup and the way it is on the American show? And they answered, of course it will be. And I said, well, look, that stuff just doesn't walk in on a day-to-day basis. These are all rare and unusual items that we just don't see. We see the regular stuff, jewelry, musical instruments, television, stereos. And a reality show, I think, should have some bearing on reality, not on the producer's desire to create something. So I turned it down.
You turned that down?
I did.
But you agreed to be on my show and our show
Well, I
here.
think we're
After
talking
Hours.
about
So
reality, aren't we?
Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. You know, that means a lot to me and everyone here on the crew that you would turn down something like that, but you'd come and talk to us for 30 minutes. I really do appreciate that. Yeah, I do still want to ask you a few questions because I do love the show Pawn Stars so much, but they do make it look like items of extremely important historical value come into a pawn shop on a daily basis. Again, you say that just doesn't really happen,
Doesn't exist.
does it?
No.
Okay. But you must have seen some interesting items that you value coming through the store over the years. I know that you're an art aficionado, for example,
Yes.
right? Tell me about some of the artworks that have come through the pawn shop that you as an art aficionado have really appreciated.
Well, the most interesting piece was a very, very old Emily Carr watercolor that came in several years ago. And it had been recently bought at auction maybe 2 years before, so it was very easy to determine value. But it was a 100-year-old watercolor. It was beautiful.
Speaking of determining value and whether it's real or not, provenance. Could you define what provenance
Provenance
means?
is the history of ownership of an item.
And people will often provide provenance.
Particularly with artwork, it's important.
And what will that include?
It will go back as far as they can determine ownership. It may go back to the original owner of the piece.
Here's what I'm getting at. I remember watching an episode of Pawn Stars, and they bought Rick Harrison bought what he thought was a rare book. And he had some provenance come with it, like a letter of authenticity. But it all turned out to be bogus. Here's my question. If someone sells something claiming it is something, and you buy it, do you have some recourse going back to that person and say, look, you said this was this, but it's not. Do you have some recourse as the buyer?
Generally not.
Generally not?
Generally
you still
not.
take the loss, eh?
Yes.
Can you go to court at least?
Oh, if you can find the person and you want to spend the time and the money to chase them, yes, you might get somewhere, but generally speaking, it's not worth the effort.
Has that ever happened to you, actually?
We are a natural prey for con men. They try, we have to be smarter.
Have you ever had a samurai sword come through the place at all?
Oh, sure, several.
Several? How much are those things worth?
Not very much in my books.
Okay. Another thing that they buy on Pawn Stars quite a bit are guns. Again, this is a difference between Canada and the United States, right?
Yes.
You say that, how often will a firearm come through the store?
I would say maybe one a month, and it's rifles and shotguns, not handguns.
Are these old weapons that are antiques, or are they?
Not generally speaking.
Generally not?
No.
Okay. This is a pet peeve of mine from watching the shows like Pawn Stars that I'm hoping you can talk about. I see a lot of people bring in like World Championship sports rings, from like a Super Bowl or maybe an NBA championship. And it kind of bothers me a little bit that something like that would end up in the hands of someone who's not really even affiliated with the team. And then they go in and then they try and make some money off of it. Now I understand that some of these rings, they may be given to cheerleaders or front office staff, and then they end up selling them. I don't know. You said that you have come across the odd gray. You told me you've never come across a Stanley Cup ring, right?
Nope, not
but you
yet.
have come across the odd gray cup ring.
I think we've had 3 or 4 brought in by the players themselves.
Okay. And you're okay with that? Yeah.
As long as it's the players, yes.
Yes.
We know exactly who received it.
Yeah.
They're standing in front of me, no problem. We're sorry to see them get into a tough situation where they need to borrow money that way. And more often than not, they'll be back for the item.
Oh, they will?
Yes.
Oh, they're actually pawning it?
Yes.
And
unlike the American show where everything is buying and selling, they don't show you very much lending. Lending is 95% of what we do.
I suppose for people down in the States that maybe buy like an NBA championship ring or a World Series championship ring, I guess if they really love the sport and love the team and maybe feel a connection to it by owning something like that, I can understand that. But I don't know. It's one of those things. I just think it should sort of stay within the team, within the players.
You would think so, but there's a huge market for that type of item.
And speaking of sports memorabilia, that was a big thing in the '90s. Is that a big thing anymore? Like sports collectibles?
Still.
It is?
The thing that died out was cards. Baseball, hockey, football cards. Jerseys, still a big deal. Autographed jerseys, the rings, game-worn jerseys, game-worn equipment. There's still a huge market for that.
And speaking of autographs, that's another thing they do on shows like Pawn Stars. They're always bringing in an expert to authenticate an autograph. What I think is really interesting is you authenticate a lot of your own autographs, don't you? At least the ones that come through your store.
Well, the ones for the ties, we know exactly we got them from the people who signed them. That's not an issue. Okay. Other signed memorabilia is always questionable. And half the stuff on eBay is of dubious origin. And you got to be careful.
Okay. When people come into the pawn shop, they obviously have the opportunity to actually pawn the item and then pay the loan back and have the item returned back to them. Or they can just sell the item to you. What percentage of people will pawn their item and what percentage will actually want to sell their item?
On an average day, we write between 140 and 150 loans. And we probably do 3 or 4 purchases. It's all borrowing or lending, depending on which side you're on. But that's the name of the game. It's about a loan.
Does anybody ever come in wanting to pawn an item and you actually kind of like it and maybe you'd like to buy it? And that must be one of the nature of the businesses that items come in that maybe you want to buy and keep for yourself.
Me
Does that ever
personally,
happen?
yes, but my wife says don't bring anything home unless you're taking something back. I think I have pretty much everything I want right now.
Good for you. What are some interesting sports items though that you've had through over the years? I know you're a sports fan. You like hockey.
Most recently, we've had a couple of wonderful autographed jerseys come in. We have a Luongo jersey from the Vancouver Olympics, autographed, of course. I think there was also a Kessler jersey from the Canucks from very recently. But don't see a lot of autographed material, unfortunately. We'd like to see more.
You know what I also found interesting is that some people will actually use the pawn services as cheap storage.
Yes.
Explain that to me. I actually found that to be really interesting.
Especially apartment dwellers who don't trust the storage lockers in the basement or don't have enough space for those firearms or golf clubs or any seasonal equipment, snowboard or skis. We're more than happy to make small loans on these things and sit on them until they want them back.
So instead of me going and renting a storage locker and paying for that, I could come to you and I could pawn my item.
You could borrow $50 and pay $2.50 a month. Interest, storage, everything.
That's really interesting, yeah.
It's cheap enough, yes.
And there are warranties on the items. Explain that to me.
The jewelry we sell, we absolutely guarantee it will appraise for at least double anywhere. Everything else we sell, be it electrical, mechanical, whatever, we give a 3-month bumper-to-bumper warranty. The only thing we can't guarantee is speakers, because they can be blown up at any time. But anything else, we've already checked it out. We know it's perfect, or we're not going to try and sell it.
And what's the maximum loan you'll do?
We've lent up to $100,000 at one time. And I would certainly lend more if the collateral was right. Not an issue.
So you've obviously been in New Westminster for a really long time.
We just had our 59th anniversary 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me, how has New Westminster changed, since you were a teenager there to what it is today?
Well, I've always thought of Columbia Street as sort of Main Street, USA, 1958. It's creeping up. We're into the 60s at least by now. It's improving. There's a few more high-rise condo buildings and apartment buildings in the neighborhood that there didn't used to be. Generally speaking, it's cleaned up. It's much better than previously.
New Westminster SkyTrain Station was a pretty rough place there for a little while, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a lot of drug dealing going on, but that's history.
Do you like what's going on there at the New Westminster SkyTrain Station, the shops in New West?
Oh, it's all good for everybody on Columbia Street. The more people around, the better it is for everyone.
Well, this is your opportunity to make a suggestion to the people who run the shops at Columbia Street. You and I, we were driving by there, and there's a movie theater there, and a number of other businesses. But what do you think the exterior of the shops in New West is missing? This is your opportunity to speak with the people who run it there.
Well, I have no suggestions for anybody other than that Cineplex, which has 10 screens and no signage whatsoever as to what's playing. None at all. I find that hard to believe.
There should be a big marquee there
even
now playing.
Even a moving billboard that says Theater 1 is such and such and Theater 2 is such and such. Something to give us a clue as to what they got.
I hope that they're listening today. Just generally, what are some other businesses you'd like to see pop up in New Westminster? What do you think would just complement what is already there?
We need a good grocery store. We need some better restaurants. We need fewer bridal salons, which we seem to have a glut of. I don't know why. But Columbia Street's a great spot. It's far less costly than any other downtown Main Street and any of the suburbs of Vancouver. I know the residential costs are far less than Vancouver or even Burnaby. We're not that far away from downtown Vancouver. We're 25 minutes away.
And it's on the waterfront.
And we're on the waterfront. We're on the river.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure.
Okay. Now, I do have a housekeeping matter to take care of. For those of you who watched my interview with New Westminster Mayor Wayne Wright, you'll remember the mayor did ask me a couple times to ask him about Wait For Me Daddy. All right, but unfortunately I had a brain cramp when he asked me a couple times to ask him about it. So I'm trying to redeem myself here. This is actually really cool, what's happening. Wait For Me Daddy is the famous photograph taken by Province newspaper photographer Claude B. Detloff on Columbia Street in New Westminster in 1940. The most famous Canadian picture of the Second World War, the photo captured a line of men of a BC regiment walking towards a waiting train on 8th Street in New Westminster. The magical moment in time shows a white-haired boy tugging away from his mother's grasp and running towards his father, marching with the row of soldiers. The boy in the photo is Warren Whitey Bernard, and he was 5 years old at the time. Today, Whitey is in his late 70s, and the City of New Westminster has commissioned a public art project to commemorate the Wait For Me Daddy photo. The Wait For Me Daddy Memorial will be a bronze, life-size sculpture created by well-known artists Veronica and Edwin Dam Nogales. Have you heard of them at all?
No, sorry, I haven't.
You have not, okay. It will go on display somewhere in downtown New Westminster. I did talk with New Westminster Councillor Lori Williams, and she says the Wait For Me Daddy Memorial will be placed in situ, which means exact location in this case. Are you familiar with that term, in situ?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In this case, it will be placed at Columbia Street and 8th Avenue, where the photo was taken those many years ago, and the unveiling is scheduled for October 4th of this year, says Councillor Williams. What do you think of that idea? I mean, you've been
fabulous.
You think it's a good idea?
Great idea.
Yeah. Do you like what's going on with New Westminster these days on Columbia Street?
Excellent.
You know, shops
it's being
in New West?
revitalized like crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of activity.
Yeah, I really like what's going on in New Westminster too.
Me too.
And I really appreciate you taking the time talking to me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank Michael Isman for being my marvelous guest today, and I want to thank you for watching After Hours. I'm your host, Stephen Braverman. We'll see you next time.